Let's create a Lambda and then use API gateway to connect this Lambda and then to hit that API from the internet. And this is only used for testing. Of course, it's not going to be secure, it's not protected. And so in the Lambda that we're going to create, this Lambda functions will be doing nothing but just says hi. Go to Lambda and create function. Keep author from scratch, and in the function name, make sure it's case sensitive, so you can do say hi. I'm going to do lowercase say hi, all in one word, and I'm going to use Python. Now you can select, you can leave this 86 to 64 as default architecture, and then leave the rest as default. Just create function. And it will default to a Python script. The Python script right now would just say simply print hello from Lambda. So you can change that to something. Hello from, for example, hello from Jess. And you can also click test. When you test, it will say create new event. And then since this Lambda doesn't really take doesn't really read from the event, so you could just do a test event and it doesn't matter what you have in there. So you could just say give it a name, test event, and you could leave the default JSON alone and just click on save. And then when you test, it would give you a response. You have the test event name, test event, response status code 200, that means successful. If you hit the Lambda directly, the response from Lambda is hello from Lambda, and here it says the changes has not been deployed, and that's why instead of saying hello from Jessica, it says hello from Lambda. So now we need to deploy the changes that we have just made here in the code editor. Now that it says the deploy button has been disabled, you can click on test. It should say hello from Jess. So now that we have this Lambda functions created, you can scroll up a little bit and you can see that this Lambda now has a name called set hi. It has no layer. It doesn't have any trigger, which we're going to next. We're going to create a simple trigger in the API gateway so you can hit it from the public internet. And keep in mind that the function that we just created does nothing but just print hello from Jess, right? So it's safe to have others call that API. But imagine if your API would read from your internal resource, and then your API should be protected. In this case, we're just demonstrating how to create a public API that connects to in Lambda, so we can leave that API unprotected. Right, so now you see previously I have created an API, so let's remove that. So we can start that from fresh. And let me just delete this API as well. Coding tips is from my previous projects. And each time when you remove some resource from AWS console, it usually asks you to manually type in a confirmations, just as a safety measure. And it also has some notification on top, and you can click them away. Sometimes it's a little distracting. So once I remove all the APIs, what we could see is what if you don't have an API, this is what you will see. Here it says choose an API type, and there are three. At the time of this recording, there are these API types, and for today, we're going to, for simplicity, we are going to create an HTTP API. This one builds low latency and cost-effective REST APIs with built-in feature, and this is the API type we're going to choose in order to hit this API and connect it to Lambda publicly. So we're gonna click on build, and here you can see that there are 4 different steps: create an API, configure routes, defining steps, reviewing, and create. We're going to follow those steps. Create an API, the first step to do is to add an integration, and the API integrating with Lambda. And here is some description. So for Lambda integration, you can click on Add Integration, and here you can select whether to integrate with Lambda or HTTP. We can select Lambda, and here you make sure that your region matches where you created that Lambda, because you may have created the Lambda in a different region. Just make sure that you pick the right region. Since I created my Lambda in US West 2, so I'm going to leave that unchanged. And here it's easy because I only have one Lambda in this account, so I'm just going to select that Lambda functions. And then next I would click on add API name, and the API name, let's say hi, all lowercase, and you could say hi or say hi. Just make sure that it is, just keep in mind that the API name is case sensitive. And then, so if you have say hi, you need to use uppercase S and uppercase H, and which typically in the API, this is less common. At least I think keep it simple. Just say hi, or yeah, let's just say hi, HI. And then when you click on next, the API, the resource path, it's filled in as say hi because it's from the previous creation. So I was caught off guard because this was left from previous creation. So I'm going to remove, so to keep it straightforward and that less confusing, click on route and type hi, and then we want to pick the method get integration target, and then keep the stage default. Click on next, and that now review and create. When you click on create, this which it says successfully created API, and now we can click on this API. This caught me off guard a little because this pop-up, the new API that was created pop up right here, but it wasn't super obvious at first. So, but just look for that API here in this window. Once it's created, you can click on this API and it will give you a invoke URL. So you take this invoke URL, you can click on it, and then here it says resource not found, but you just add a path. You can add hi. So once you add the hi, remember we add our resource, our path is set to hi, and on this path is connected to the say hi Lambda integration as the integration target. Let me go back and just review. If you click on API detail, it gives you this, and then you can select route. When you click on this API details, all the underdeveloped, this becomes the information of this API. So when you click on route, this is the routes of this API, and this is the API ID, ZEI, this is API ID. And so when you click on this get, which shows you our previously setting, it's the get/hi, and then you can click on integration. This will shows that it's integrated to a AWS Lambda, and you can click on this link, or rather select manage integrations. When you select manage integrations, you can see that it's currently integrated with the say hi Lambda functions. Going back here, again, you can hit it with /hi with this API ID, the internal AWS API, which is called SQ API, and this is the region of where this API is hosted. And then you can also hit it using curl. So if I take this URL, the control commands on Mac, I have command see, and then do a curl. It's going to print hello Jess. So what we could do also is we could update the Lambda. If we go back to this Lambda functions, and let's update this Lambda to say something else. You can say hello from, I can change it from hello from Jess 20, or maybe Jessica, and then add a couple exclamation mark, and then deploy. Remember, we had to deploy before we test, and we click on test. It says hello from Jessica with the changes, extra exclamation mark. Now we can go back to the pages or the URL and hit refresh. Now we see the changes taken place. Hopefully this demonstrates an easy way to create a public API and using a very simple Lambda.